Hi, my name is Jamie McLeod-Skinner, and I'm a proud rural Oregonian who believes in protecting our democracy, and that includes electing good leaders that we can trust to serve all Oregonians. Over the past few months, emerging rural leaders have been reaching out for help communicating their vision for our state to rural voters. I had that same challenge when I was running as a rural Democrat, so I've joined with friends to help amplify the voices of rural candidates that are on the ballot this November. We'll be hosting these panels on Tuesdays and Thursdays through Election Day. And tonight we have three really great candidates from Central and Southern Oregon. Jackie Leung from HR 19, House Rep Seat 19, Faith Leith from Southern Oregon, from Klamath and Lake counties, and Jerry Samaniego from Leung County and Douglas County. Let's start out by having you all introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your district. And Jackie, why don't we start with you?
Great, thank you so much for hosting me and for your work and support. So hello everybody, my name is Jackie Leung. I'm a candidate for Oregon House District 19 that includes parts of Salem, Turner, and Almsville. Now, I grew up in a small town of about 16,000 people. It was a quiet small town outside of a major metropolitan city that was about an hour's drive away. Now, I first learned about politics when I was 8 years old, and it was actually presidential elections. And I remember it was Reagan because I saw ads on television. And I remember I asked my mother who she voted for. And her response was to silence me with, "We don't talk about that." After that, I learned we don't talk about politics. And when I turned 18, I voted for the first time. And there were times I voted in other elections, but I never truly felt connected. I did not know them. They didn't know me. And I kept asking and wondering, why isn't there somebody who speaks for me and for my community? And then I realized, why am I looking for someone else? Why not me? I'm a mother, a caregiver, a domestic violence survivor, a former single parent, and a full-time employee. And to me, it's vital that we have people in office who look like us, who have the lived experience that we do, and most of all, who will listen and advocate for us. I'm not a typical run-of-the-mill politician. I put our community first. It is why I openly advocate for hearing from our community. It is why I ran and won for city council. It is also why I'm running for state representative. We're dealing with major public health crises today. The impact of racism, unemployment, COVID-19, parents having to learn how to do remote learning with their children, our homeless community. We need a public health champion who's going to work on addressing public health emergencies. We need someone who's going to prioritize working for our families, our seniors, our homeless community. I'm also a union member. It is vital that we continue to protect our unions from threats that threaten to dismantle them. We need someone who's going to show up and do the work. As a public health advocate, I continue to work with communities on building networks, leadership development, job training, and healthcare education. I will do so, and I will continue to do so as your state representative.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you for your current public service and for stepping up and running for this office. As you're saying, these issues are so critical for our state right now, and the perspective that you bring from your region and this understanding of lived experience is just really powerful. Thank you. Jerry, let's move on to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your district.
I'm Jerry Samaniego. I'm running in House District 7, which is East Lane County and East and South Lane County and East and North Douglas County. So that's the McKenzie River down across Fall Creek, Cottage Grove, all the way down kind of the northern tip suburbs of Roseburg. It's a beautiful, just the most beautiful district, I think, in the state. I realize I'm biased, but we've got the McKenzie, we've got the West Fork, and we've got the North Umpqua. I challenge you all to beat that. The reason I'm running is because I'm tired of having a rep who doesn't represent my values. I think rural Oregonians are on the front lines of climate change, and we need to address that. And my rep is just not, he's literally not there. He literally walked out on that. And that's what got me into this race.
Well, thanks, Jerry. And I've driven through your district many times because heading over to Central Oregon, drive right through that area. It's truly beautiful. But don't leave that challenge because Central Oregonians will, it looks a little bit different out here. It's a bit drier, but we'll step up to that challenge because we're really proud of our area as well, as are our Southern Oregonians. And so Faith, let me turn it over to you. In the southern part of Klamath and Lake counties, another beautiful area, a bit drier than the Cascades. Tell us a bit about yourself and your district.
Okay, my name is Faith. Thank you for doing this, by the way.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be on this panel. And my name is Faith Leith. I'm the Democratic candidate for House District 56, which covers southern Klamath County and Lakeview, so that part of Lake County. I shouldn't have to say this, but I believe in science. I believe climate change is real and it needs to be addressed locally and nationally. When you speak to young people, you feel the urgency that they feel when discussing this issue. My grandson is 22 and he's very upset about climate change. And they want us to change everything now and not wait. It's their future and many of them are convinced that the adults just don't care. And so all of these issues affect the district. We have a huge amount of diabetics and healthcare issues, and COVID is growing here, and school issues and rural broadband. All those issues are, that affect every county and every state are in spades down here. But climate change, I believe, is the most important when it ties everything else together. In Southern Oregon, we've had intense wildfires and droughts. And we need to bring everyone to the table, the tribes, the county and city officials and stuff, everyone, environmentalists. We all need to be involved in working out what the future is going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years. And because we need to make sure that we have a safe and prosperous future for our children. So the Basin residents right now don't have a voice in Salem. I know the representatives may have left before, but this is a critical issue, this climate change. And Al Gore's been talking about it for 20 years, and it's been going on longer than that. But Jimmy Carter talked about it. He had some, when I worked back in Washington, D.C., which I spent time in Washington, D.C. Oh my goodness, okay. Why I decided to run in House District 56 was because of them not addressing climate change and walking out because of climate change bills. So I have a degree in political science from UCLA. I was a staff member in Washington, D.C. on the House Rules Committee. My career was in journalism. So I've spent time working on these issues and I understand them. And I believe we need someone that's going to be a moderate, work across the aisle. Good ideas can come from anywhere. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Faith. And I know Jerry was also talking about the wildfires that have hit his district as well earlier, prior when we were all discussing these issues. So it's something it's impacted us. And also when you talk about technology and the need to really respect science, your district is also home to OIT, the Oregon Institute of Technology. Yeah. And so we have some great folks coming out of OIT who are trained and want to solve these problems and are looking for the jobs to create the solutions. And so we just got to focus our attention there and focus our resources there. And I think that'll help us.
And we call it Oregon Tech now.
Oregon Tech. Okay, so I finished high school just over the hill in Ashland, and so we called it something a little bit different. But then again, we called SOU SOC back then. So you all are looking to represent rural areas. Jackie, I know your area includes Salem, but it's also a lot of rural area. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm seeing more and more is the real value of emerging rural leaders. I want to ask you all, and let's start with you, Jerry. And I'll rotate through. What important perspective do emerging rural leaders bring to the legislature, and how does this better serve all Oregonians?
That's a great question, Jamie. I think, and Faith and Jackie both touched on this. for me, the perspective that I've seen, and I've gotten to know a number of other candidates, and for me, the kind of common thing that's really inspiring is that understanding that rural Oregonians are on the front lines of climate change, and that we need to address this issue. And this is something that will affect all Oregonians. I think those of us out here who live in rural areas, and folks who make their living on the land will all tell you that it's not the same now as it was 20 years ago. It's changing, and we need to address that. So I think, to me, that's the most important perspective that this group of rural leaders brings to the table.
Thank you. Faith, what are, from your perspective, what's the important perspective that emerging rural leaders bring to the legislature?
Well, being rural, I believe because everything is so intense here with the wildfires and the droughts and the farming issues and how we're going to deal with water, and we're learning, and everybody here is learning this lesson that everything is tied to this climate change thing. The food supply chain, our health, because the wildfires with the smoke was horrible. We had horrible air quality days, and everything is tied to it. We need to deal with this issue, and it's a #1 priority. And the rural area we can make the solar panels and have solar farms that are running our cities and stuff. So we need to do these things out here. We need to be on the cutting edge of wind power and solar power, and we can do it if we just focus on it and then people admit there's a problem. Alcoholics, you can't get better unless you admit you have a problem, and we have a problem that people don't want to. Anyway.
Well, and I really appreciate that. And I always remember I enjoy spending time in Lake County, and always impressed by how much solar they're using there. And then it really underscores the fact that this is not just a partisan issue. The wisdom of good economic development through the use of renewable energy just makes economic sense as well. Jackie, again, you kind of straddle that divide with some urban, some rural, and really the home of our legislature, folks coming from all over the state. So bringing those perspectives. What, from your point of view, what important perspective do rural leaders bring to this conversation, and emerging rural leaders? Because I think the point's also been made that we've got folks who represent rural areas who have not been addressing the issues and challenges we're seeing in rural areas. So, what are your thoughts on this question?
Now, that's a very good question. So to me, emerging rural leaders bring a perspective that's often missing in the state legislature. When we're deciding state policy, state leaders should consider if the decision results in a disproportionate impact on our rural communities. And it is vital that we bring forth these concerns. A win for larger cities such as Salem and Eugene may not necessarily be a win for smaller towns such as Turner, Amso, or even Estacada. As rural leaders, we also have the opportunity to connect with the rural community members and to ensure that their voices, their concerns, and their stories are heard and amplified within state legislature.
Thank you. Now I want to just ask a more personal question. And Faith, we'll start with you. What leader or historical figure inspires you, and why?
That's an easy one. I had the opportunity to meet with and chat with Barack Obama when he was president. And and I've read The Audacity of Hope like 3 or 4 times. Last time I read it was getting ready for this election, and I actually treated it like a textbook. And he was a pragmatist first and an ideologue second. And you work on what you can get done. Anyway, I learned a lot from him. I find I'm always inspired and uplifted and challenged. So
thank you. I think, well, I've lost my rotation has gone. Jackie, I'm going to throw this at you next. Sorry about that. What leader or historical figure inspires you, and why?
I love this question. So the person who inspires me is Grace Lee Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs was an Asian American activist who initially started in academia, but went on to pursue a life of community activism. She encouraged questioning we as individuals, our relationship to our community, to our country, and even globally. And her activism is what inspires me the most. She organized food cooperatives, community groups that supported the elderly, and labor unions, focusing on organizing unemployed workers. I see the work I do in my community similar to what she did. Through my nonprofit, we distribute food boxes and meals to the community. And as leaders, we must and should connect with our communities. And this means community activism to build long-lasting and authentic relationships.
Oh, you know, one of the things I love about asking this question is that I often will hear about folks that I admire or I've heard of before, but I always love hearing about people that are new to me. And it's always this sense of like, why didn't I know that? And it really, I mean, part of what it really speaks to is there's so many amazing people who are doing really great work. I mean, I think of all of you, you're not, being a rural Democrat is tougher in this state. And being able to step up and be the voice of your community and work so hard for your community, it's something I can say that I deeply admire of all of you. But thanks for that, Jackie. Jerry, what leader or historical figure inspires you and why?
Oh, great question. There's no shortage of inspirational figures in American history, from Ben Franklin to Harriet Tubman to Cesar Chavez to Sonia Sotomayor. But I've been thinking a lot lately about FDR and how he overcame physical disability to rise to the presidency, and then how his visionary leadership pulled us out of the Depression, and then his resolute steadfastness helped us defeat fascism in Europe. There's just a lot of parallels there with what a lot of what we're seeing today. So I've been drawing strength from FDR lately.
Thank you for that. It's funny, someone was on one of these panels a couple times ago and mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt. So it's really, yeah, a lot of just great resources and great sources of wisdom and insights. Let me ask you all a couple individual questions, just that I'll target at you individually, trying to focus more on your background and some of the work you've done. And the first is actually something we're all facing, that is COVID-19. But Jackie, you've got a public health background, and so really have a deeper understanding of some of the impacts that we're all seeing around us. What are some of the greatest challenges that you're seeing in your district and statewide? And what do you want to focus on when you're in the legislature?
That's a great question. So some of the things I'm seeing as challenges is there's a number of families who are struggling to educate their children at home. There's families who are struggling to complete work online because of lack of broadband or the high cost of internet. Several are struggling with just even getting access to the technology that they need to be able to do that education. Well, families and youth in particular are dealing with mental health issues. In the state legislature, I want to focus on several important areas of healthcare. I want to ensure that there's better care for a larger number of people for less money. Second, mental health. Oregon must reprioritize mental health more so now than ever before. Third, we must continue to be vigilant about COVID-19. As of today, 600 Oregonians have died. To me, this is unacceptable. We must continue to follow the science and public health efforts to protect our most vulnerable communities. And then we would be able to reopen our schools when it is safe for our children, for our families, for our teachers, and for our staff. All are hardworking Oregonians.
Thank you for that. And as a mom with a kid who's doing, a son who's doing distance learning, and also someone who serves on the ESD, the Education Service District for my county here in Jefferson County, very near and dear to my heart. And also that issue of rural broadband and public health. It's something that we hear consistently, along with making sure we're a good steward of our natural resources. But there's such an important perspective that emerging rural leaders bring to this discussion of a commitment to serving and addressing and showing up in community, but also of bringing that rural perspective that I think is so important. And so, again, so important about the races you're all running. Jerry, your community was one of the hardest hit by the wildfires last month. And you were talking about this, before we had a little conversation, before we went on to this panel. You were talking about this quite passionately. How is everyone doing now? And what are your thoughts on the recovery? And what would be your focus if elected on helping your community and your district respond and recover to the devastating wildfires?
Yeah, great question. My community, both here on the McKenzie as well as down in Glide and in Douglas County, were both hard hit by the wildfires. I had my first real look at the damage up the McKenzie last week. I've been trying to kind of stay out of that area and let crews do their work, but work took me up there, so I had a chance to go, and it's absolutely as bad as you've heard. So many kind of local landmarks are gone. It makes my heart hurt. And also for my neighbors, the fire came within 200 yards of my house, so I can walk around my neighborhood and see the damage. There's folks less than a quarter mile away from me who have lost everything. So I think our first order of business is to make sure that the McKenzie School stays open and stays fully staffed, because that really is the beating heart of this community. Even though students aren't there right now, it's being used as a relief center. So even though it's not being home to students right now, it still is the heart of our community. So we absolutely need to make sure that continues, and that would be a high priority for me. And then the other thing that talking to my neighbors that really has emerged is the worry about gentrification, and just how are we going to keep our low-income neighbors in the community, so that they're not driven out. And so that's going to be another focus for me. I know it's not really the state's focus. It's kind of more in the area of FEMA, but we need to the legislature needs to do whatever it can to help folks stay in their homes in these communities. So that would be a high priority for me in this session.
I really appreciate you mentioning that, because we had essentially a housing crisis to begin with, incredible housing shortages. I mean, in some counties, and some of our 36 counties, is actually at an emergency declaration level in terms of housing shortages. And then the double cruelty of the wildfires is that it, in many cases, I mean, in your area and also in Southern Oregon, really seem to hit some of the lowest income, some of the most vulnerable folks. And so, yeah, this issue of gentrification, I so appreciate that this is a priority for you, because making sure that we have a roof over our head, I mean, it's the basic thing we all want for our families, right? And making sure that we have advocates who understand from it impacted your neighbors. This is not theory for you, but know that personal experience of the devastation of wildfires and that commitment to looking out for your neighbors. Again, this really speaks to me to the importance of the voices that you all bring and bringing that forward to the legislature. Faith, let me turn to you. You mentioned your districts, the two counties that include your district in the southern part of Klamath and Lake counties. So you're talking a bit about what's there now. What's your vision for your district for 10 years from now? What would you like to see in your district?
Well, I've talked to a lot of the farmers, and growing hemp, industrial hemp, they call it, is becoming more and more popular here. They can have 2 crops a season. It uses 25% of the water that alfalfa uses, and which there's a lot of alfalfa that's grown here, but it's a way to deal with the drought and still be able to have crops that we can. And with hemp, the hemp growers, I spoke to 4 of them, and they don't like sending their product over to Medford to be processed. They think there should be processing plants here. And I've spoken to the president of KCC and of Oregon Tech, and they really want to get involved in this, in new industries, and what can they do and how can they be helpful and engage more in the community right here instead of just training kids to go elsewhere. And so they're both very, very involved in that. So I just think having solar farms, having, windmills, we need to do, we could be the place in Oregon that produce become self-sufficient. And I think we could be the model. And I would really like to see the Klamath area, the Klamath Basin, become the model of how you can become self-sufficient and not have to send out all your products out for value-added stuff to other places, but do it all right here. And we've got two colleges that are willing to help. So
yeah. Well, Klamath Community College, another great school. I've got a friend who, actually a couple friends who are administrators and teach there. That sense, that business savvy of local economic development, I think it's true regionally with different parts of Oregon, but even for our state as a whole, the product that we harvest, making sure that we are utilizing it and making sure that we're developing that product in place, because that just expands the workforce. So yeah, no, I really appreciate that. The other thing, with the reduced demand on water, the Klamath area is famous for the conflicts around water. That will help address those issues and the conflicts and enable better relationship with the tribes, the Klamath Confederated Tribes. So I really appreciate that perspective. Jackie, going back to you. You mentioned in your opening remarks that you are a survivor of domestic violence. And first of all, thank you for the courage to say that and to name it and to bring focus to addressing it, because, especially in this time of COVID, we know that there's been an increase and we know that this is a problem within homes. And so your courage to stand up and say, this is my experience and we need to address this experience is a really powerful statement for so many people in our community. So thank you for that. But you're also, I know, part of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Fund Advisory Committee. So you're also serving in that capacity, using your knowledge and helping that regard, helping our state. Based on your experience and the work you've done, what's your take on where are we falling short with regards to DV, and what changes would you want to make in the legislature?
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging my lived experience first and foremost. It's something that it's taken me a long time to acknowledge and to share, and I'm grateful to be able to share in this space. So, as a domestic violence survivor, DV is one of my top priorities. And there's two that in particular that I would really like to be able to focus on first and foremost. One, I'd like to ensure that there's policy that actually helps survivors ease back into society, such as, increasing access to trauma-informed mental health professionals. A second area that I'm really interested in is currently that there's the policy that exists to provide technical assistance and support to DV survivors is about $1,200, which is not enough to cover the cost of court legal fees or even providing enough funding for security deposit or even a first month's rent for many survivors. I would like to be able to look at whether we could explore increasing the funds and also reducing restrictions so that it could cover the cost of court or legal fees and actually cover the cost of rent and security deposits for people who are escaping a domestic violence situation.
Thank you for this work in rebuilding community, but also individuals. Jerry, we're going into one of the most frightening and high profile and arguably the most important election of our lifetimes, or lifetime. What's your biggest worry going into this election? I mean, does it keep you up at night? What keeps you up at night?
Climate keeps me up at night. We've covered that a lot, so I'm not going to go into that. The cost of healthcare is something that I personally am dealing with because I've been going through some life changes, and I'm having to seek my own policy out on the marketplace, and that's keeping me up at night. But the big thing that is an immediate concern is political extremism. We've got a president who refuses to say that he will support a peaceful transition of power. Just last week, we had terrorists in Michigan trying to overthrow the government and kidnap a duly elected governor. And it's not like this is something that's far away. Oregon has had its own issues with extremism just a few years ago. And you look at the way that folks treat our governor. And you look at the fact that we had just before the wildfires, in fact, I was still trying to process the fact that a speaker stood on the steps of the Capitol and said that he wanted to shoot Democratic politicians like me, like us on this call, dead in the streets. I was still trying to process that when I was evacuated from the wildfire. So that keeps me up at night. That's a concern for me.
Yeah, our finding that ability to disagree on policy while still protecting our democracy and respecting our different perspectives and respecting our differences and protecting our vulnerable communities. I'm making those structural changes to make sure that our BIPOC communities and our vulnerable communities are become part of, addressing the multiple pandemics we're facing. That's part of it, but then also creating space for those different perspectives. I mean, as Oregonians, we have a wide variety of opinions, but there's a difference between having a different policy idea and threatening your neighbor, and or not supporting and rebuilding the democracy that that's so critical to us being able to engage in this dialogue. And I'll be the first to say, I'll call out both sides, my own party as well, to say, look, we need to respect process. But the point you've raised about that's a bridge too far. When people are threatened, that takes us down a whole road of really undermining this essence of the democracy, the democratic republic that we're looking to preserve and to rebuild. Faith, let me wrap up the questions with you. You were talking before about climate issues and a real focus on that. That's going to mean that we don't just keep doing the same thing we've been doing all along, because that's got us here. So what changes, lifestyle changes, do you think will be required of us in this next decade and going forward, not just in your district, but in Oregon and really around the world?
Yeah, that's a good, and I wanted to just respond to this last question. What keeps me up at night is not so much our leader, but what I've discovered about members of my family and my brother and things like that. How the Americans have reacted is just, it keeps me up at night and it just breaks my heart. But I think that we are going to, I've had a lot of conversations with my 22-year-old grandson, who's going to be an air traffic controller. And he's a vegan, not a vegetarian. He goes from eating meat to being a vegan because he wants to eat lower on the food chain. He thinks that we need to stop eating so much cattle, maybe all end it to get all together, that we do more walking and hiking and use electric cars and the train instead of flying. And all these in the next 10 years, I've talked with him, he sees a lot of changes, recycling stuff, just simple things like they've done in Europe for years, but you take a bottle back to the store and you refill it for your wine or your Windex. You refill, they've been doing that in Europe for years. And we need to make sure in Norway, I think 2% of the stuff that they use goes into the trash. All the rest is recycled. And we just need to get into this mindset of what we're doing today is for our grandchildren, is 7 generations down. How are we impacting the unintended consequences of what we're doing? And Americans aren't used to thinking like that, and we really need to change the way we think. It's going to be hard. It's going to be growing pains. It's going to be very painful.
Yeah, but that classic tribal wisdom is really, that 7th generation is really key. And then also, given once we used to ship our recycling to China to use it and to recycle, and of course that relationship, a lot of our international relationships have broken down over the past 4 years. But we no longer do that. So now what we think of as recycling is now essentially going into the garbage. So that transition, you raised some really key points there. And then as an Oregonian, I have to say, there's always your growlers. You got to refill your growlers as well. So we're almost out of time. So I wanted to just wrap up by asking you all how voters can learn more about you, information on your website or social media. Jerry, let me start with you. Then we'll go to Faith, and Jackie will wrap up with you. So what's your website? How do people get in touch with you? And what do you need right now? We've got tonight's the last night for folks to register to vote or to check their registration. By the time people hear this video, it'll probably be after the fact. Ballots are about to go out. What do you need, Jerry, right now? And how do people get in touch with you?
So, well, my website, jerryfororegonhd7.com, and the word for is spelled out. jerryfororegonhd7.com is the website. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, just at Jerry for Oregon. So, check me out. What we need, we always need donations, of course, and we're going to be phone banking and getting into GOTV here for the next 3 weeks. We got 21 days to go. So we just want to finish strong and run all the way through the tape.
Nice. Thank you. Faith, how do people get in touch with you or learn more about you? And what do you need these last few days?
I got a great video that someone made for me on my website, which is faith4hd56.com. And we're doing television ads starting Saturday. And so we've got radio ads going, and we've got 2 billboards up, and we're doing whatever we can do with COVID, dealing with the pandemic. And we're meeting in the park every other Friday and greeting people from a distance and stuff. But we're just doing phone banking now. The next 3 weeks is going to be the same. It's going to be phone banking, and then our TV and radio ads, and hopefully we're getting the word out there that there is a choice.
Great. Thank you so much. And Jackie, as someone who's currently a public servant, and so that's got to be even tough doing that while you're running, I wanted to give you the last word. How do people learn more about you? What do you need right now? And how do people learn more about you?
Thank you. So folks could go visit my webpage, jackiefororegon.org, and 4 is spelled out F-O-R. People could follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and it's the Jackie for Oregon. Again, the 4 is spelled out. And everybody, we're 21 days away from elections. Vote early, vote and be informed. Second, for my campaign, the gift of time and money. So time in the form of phone banking to help us call our voters, writing letters to the editor, talking about your support for us, your endorsements, your wallet, whether it's $100, whether it's $50, or even $6, every amount counts. Help us host a virtual fundraiser. My staff also has a virtual toolkit to make things easier. You've met several great candidates, throughout House District 19, House District 54, or 56, sorry, and House District 7. So get to know us. We are here. We want to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for running. Thank you for bringing this vision and this sense of what we need in rural areas. I so appreciate the work you're doing. And yes, everyone, your vote is your voice, and your voice needs to be heard. So make sure you get your ballot in as soon as possible. Postmarks do not count. So you've got to mail your ballot in early, at least a week early, or drop it in a drop box, but get your ballot in. And also remember, we've got folks at all level and ballot. Local races are very important as well. So my heartfelt thanks to all 3 of you. Thanks for joining me for this conversation. Best of luck on your race. And I encourage folks to check out more about your race and offer their support. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.